Hello and welcome to Kaleidoscope with me, Savithri Rodrigo. There's lots of things to ponder on this week. On Let's Talk, we have four millennials. Andrew Fidel Fernando, Aisha Nazim, we have Udanjaya Vijayaratna and Kavindya Tenakon, who speak very frankly about the unfair labeling of their generation, the immediate issues to be dealt with, and also how their leaders stack up. In our People's Bank News Capsule, the CEO of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Rajiva Bandaranayake, tells us how the market will react now that elections have been announced. Activist lawyer, writer, and educator Isha Koswata empowers women on how to fight back if your mobile number is shared on groups without your knowledge. And in Life in 60, transformational coach and change enabler Sanjeev Jayaratnam spots a skill you use every day but never improved. Now, here's your People's Bank News Capsule for the week. In our People's Bank News Capsule this week, we begin with Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserves, which dropped from $7.2 billion in April to $6.4 billion in May. Sri Lanka spent over $800 million in May on debt settlement. The Asian Development Bank released $3 million to assist Sri Lanka's COVID-19 response to fund the purchase of test kits, PPEs, diagnostic reagents, and supplies. In the week ending 11th of June, the indices of the Colombo Stock Exchange went up by 2%, with the average daily turnover moving up by 15 billion rupees. With elections around the corner, how will the market react? I asked the CEO of the Colombo Stock Exchange, Rajiva Bandaranayake, just that. Rajiva, with the elections being announced, how will the market react?
I think the market will react positively. Markets don't like uncertainty, and an elected government and a parliament in place would mean political stability, and I think the market is going to read that positively.
So how much foreign interest has been there in the market?
I think, Savithri, we have always had foreign investment interest in the market since the 1990s, early 90s, and we're seeing it continuing. Even though there is a net outflow this year of about 14 billion rupees, foreigners still have been driving the market. They account for 50% of volumes. And even though we have had about 40 billion in terms of sales, we must remember that there has been also at least about 35 to 39 billion worth of purchases being made. So just as much as there is selling, we also see buying interest as well among foreigners. So 50% of volumes is quite significant.
The 200 plus listed companies, our boss can't get much traction. It's a relatively small number. What are your plans to grow it?
Yeah, I think the catalyst for the market would be when we have the larger companies coming into list. And I'm also talking not only the private sector but the state sector as well. We have quite a number of large state sector companies which are ready and able to list, which should be listing, and that will make a big difference to both size and liquidity in our markets. And if you look at overseas experience in other markets, most of those markets have developed and expanded on the back of a lot of state-owned enterprises listing in their markets. I think it's a matter of time before we see even our own state-owned enterprises reaching out to public markets and for public funding, and that will be a catalyst, I think, to change the entire direction in the market, because we'll see the market growing both in terms of size and liquidity. And once valuations improve, then we will see the larger unlisted companies among the private sector too finding a public market attractive. So I think a catalyst would be these large state-owned entities also opting to take the route of a listing.
7,400 candidates will be contesting for 225 seats in Parliament when Sri Lanka's parliamentary elections are held on the 5th of August. Due to new health and safety regulations, the estimated cost of holding the elections will double to 14 billion rupees. Sri Lanka will be open for tourists from the 1st of August, but with new health and safety measures to comply with. Besides the hotels having stringent health and safety measures in place already, tourists must have a confirmed travel itinerary with a minimum stay of 5 nights at certified accommodation, a valid return air ticket, and travel insurance with health and hospitalization cover. And what you just saw was a feel-good crowd-sourced video that reiterates Sri Lanka's wow factor post-COVID-19. Activist lawyer, writer, and educator Isha Koswata's number was shared on a WhatsApp group, naming her as a prostitute without her knowledge. She had multiple calls asking her for her price, and digging further, she found that the numbers are collected and shared through multiple means: registration sheets, mail contacts, and even reload centers. Some of the contacts shared are those of girls as young as 14. Today, she shares the legal redress there is for any other woman faced with situations like these.
What sort of threats are actually there for women who are faced in this situation?
So I can only speak for myself personally, and whoever has spoken to me about similar experiences, is when you speak out, even before the perpetrator contacts you, there are a plethora of people who will contact you, mostly men who feel attacked, who will be like, why do you want to destroy somebody's life for leaking your phone number out? Or why do you want to destroy somebody for giving someone else your picture, your Instagram profile? And they don't realize the gravity behind it, because giving somebody your phone number goes a very, very long way, to the point where they can even track where you are. I've gotten death threats, I've gotten people saying, I will rape you, I will find you, I know where you work, I will find you, I will run you over when you're walking down the street or something like that, and I will find out where you live and all of that. So those are the kind of responses that are generated, and it's quite fair that women don't want to speak out against it, because who would want to be exposed to something like that?
Legally, what can women do to fight back?
You can actually file a complaint with the police. But then if you want legal redress to take it up to court, you can actually use for me personally, with my experience, because I was branded a prostitute and men would also reach out asking for my price and and so on and so forth. For me, it was 2 counts: defamation, which is section 479 of the Penal Code. So that is basically going to handle the fact that you were publicly branded as a prostitute. So this basically, the sentencing length would be 12 months, but at the court's discretion, it can go up to 2 years imprisonment. So basically, since prostitution is not legal in this country, which is governed under the Vagrants Ordinance, soliciting for sex in return for money is also an offense. So that is covered under Section 7, which gives you 6 months imprisonment and also a fine. So whoever reaches out to you in terms of asking you, I will offer you maybe 500 rupees for half an hour, that will still count under Section 7.
Tennis star Roger Federer topped the Forbes highest paid athletes list with $106 million, edging out Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi at a close second and third. At number 66 is Virat Kohli, the only cricketer on that list. Last Monday was World Ocean Day, and the revelation is that oceans are facing a new disaster. There are more disposable masks in the sea than jellyfish. So besides the plastic that is already found in the sea, gloves and masks may be leading to our next ecological disaster. And finally, an exceedingly rare Gautier cognac from 1762 sold at an online auction for $146,000. It is one of the oldest surviving cognacs in the world, and it's just one of 3 bottles that are left. So that's it for this week's People's Bank News Capsule. Let's Talk is next. 4 millennials join us to talk about how they are labelled unjustly and what issues worry them. Do stay with us.
Technology is key in moving forward to transform every challenging moment into a profit, where manual becomes digital, business becomes smart, and lives become smarter. People's Bank Online Corporate Banking. It's truly the change you need.
By 2025, millennials or Gen Y will make up 75% of the workforce. Their influences are changing both politics and business. They are far more outspoken with their opinions and are not intimidated to stand up for justice and fight for what is right. Gen Y is highly educated. They're technologically savvy. They have non-rooted lifestyles. They're ambitious and are extremely connected. And they are overwhelmingly liberal. They are demographically larger and more ethnically diverse and are more accepting of interracial or same-sex marriage, more understanding of diversity and intercultural differences. Today on Let's Talk, we get the opinions of 4 millennials. Author of Upon a Sleepless Night and writer for ESPN Cricinfo, Andrew Fidel Fernando. Journalist and communications specialist with a focus on minority and gender-related rights-based issues, Aisha Nazim. We also have Nebula science fiction author and data scientist, senior researcher at LearnAsia and co-founder of Watchdog, Yudhanje Vijayaratna. And Kavindya Thenakon, a design researcher currently at the Stanford School of Education, focusing on innovation and creativity within the education technology space and co-founder of Without Borders. Here they are. Do you think that your generation is being unfairly judged for your opinions and your outspokenness?
Yeah, I think a lot of criticism kind of assumes a lot of things about young people and kind of dismisses, is very dismissive. So I think generally, yes, I think I would say it depends where the criticism comes from, but I do think that there's a lot of dismissive criticism that doesn't, seek to understand where where sort of younger people are coming from.
Yes, I do, because our generation has a platform basically online in which we can express a whole lot of things. So here we just put out a whole lot of opinions, which previously I think people of my age were a lot more quieter when addressing their seniors. So that has brought in a lot of criticism, and we do get called out for it.
I was actually reading this quote from Cicero, and he said, well, basically he's going on about children no longer listen to their parents, the world is coming to an end, nobody is listening anymore, and everybody seems to be writing a book. So I think generations getting flack is basically as old as civilization itself, if not at least as old as the Roman civilization. So I don't particularly think that we're getting unfair flack. I think it's the usual amount of intergenerational strife.
I think yes. I believe that we are trying to sort of reimagine a system beyond what's already here, but we've always been asked to sort of reform the system that's already broken beyond reform. So I think in that context, we are always judged with a very different lens.
What issues have to be dealt with immediately?
The first thing is to try and make sure that the virus is contained and that it's not getting out of the quarantine centers, as seems to be the case right now, to ensure that process keeps going and we stay vigilant on that front. Otherwise, I think it's, a lot of people are really feeling the pinch. So it's important now, I think, to start getting businesses rolling in, as much as possible, despite the fact that the rest of the world and kind of travel restrictions are still in place, to try and get the economy restarted again and get people back to work.
Mostly how people who are supposed to be protecting other people are not held accountable when they violate these trusts. And I think people in power should be held accountable a whole lot more than they are currently right now.
Well, the first thing that we have to deal with is that a majority of people in this, a sizable portion, I would say around 40% of the people in this country are living on a day wage. And when you arbitrarily impose lockdowns, particularly with no forward planning, when you cannot guarantee that you will open up by X amount of time, when your decisions are made on a short-term basis, people like these are the ones who get shafted the most. So the most important thing I would say is to get back to the principles of a welfare state, where we take from the top and redistribute it among the poor. But the fundamental idea is that you have a social safety net. You have insurance that when risks like this happen to your life, you will not be too adversely affected.
I think what we realized, especially in Sri Lanka and elsewhere, is that we have an access problem, where our life chances, success, how our everyday lives are, completely depends on the family that we were born to and the income level that we were born into. And that needs to change. It's 2020, and it's disgusting that our family name still determines how successful we are. So I think the accessibility needs to change.
How do your leaders stack up to your expectations?
Good question. I think on the coronavirus front, they've probably done in terms of actually containing the virus. Sri Lanka acted early and put in quite stringent measures. However, where I would be very critical is have we looked after people who are really vulnerable, who are living near or below the poverty line, who I don't think that's happened. There's been lots of issues with the 5,000 rupee grant that was supposed to go to a lot of people that hasn't been carried out in an effective way, and there genuinely are a lot of people who struggle and are still very, very fighting for their next meal.
Against my expectations, personally, very poorly. There are still a lot of stereotypes and racism among the everyday community in Sri Lanka, and there's very little that's been done, I think, to reconcile and respect each other's differences and political views. So in that sense, the leaders haven't really done very much in building these bridges.
The current crop of leaders, let's see, are primarily statists, authoritarian, top-heavy. And in this instance, generally in times of large crisis like this, authoritarian this sort of top-heavy push tends to work quite well, particularly when dealing with disasters. What I'm concerned about are the ripple effects of what happens when this goes away, because we have now made certain fundamental changes that worry me. The recent presidential gazette, for example, established an entirely military task force to ensure a virtuous society. And one of the mandates was that they take action against sort of social ills and people considered antisocial. And this, I mean, do you really want a bunch of old military men in power telling you how to live your life? Completely outside the freedoms that we normally take for granted?
I think very poorly. I think we have leaders that have been made for the world that was sort of 30 to 20 years ago, but the world has changed so dramatically even in the past 4 months, but we don't have leaders who have the creativity and the innovation and the critical thinking skills to adapt to that world, which is why the seats and the power needs to be given up for young people, especially women, to take up and lead.
Have confidence in young people. Give them a chance and they will surprise you. It might be good to remember the words of the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan. Thank you very much for joining us on Let's Talk today, our 4 millennials, Andrew Fidel Fernando, Aisha Nazim, Yudhanja Vijayaratna, and Kavindya Thenakol. Coming up next in Life in 60, let's gather some speed with Sanjeev Jayaratnam and rev up the speed in reading.
Ayubowan. Welcome to Sri Lankan Airlines, where service is intuitive and indulgence is encouraged. Our care is inherent. This is where the world comes home. Thank you for flying Sri Lankan Airlines. You're our world.
Transformational coach and change enabler Sanjeev Jayaratnam, who's renowned for his very successful speed reading programs, tells us why we need to improve that skill which we gained as a child.
Hi, would you like to have 4 extra days for the month? Yes, that's right, 4 extra days. Well, this is possible. If you read just 2 hours a day, this is definitely possible. But before I tell you how, let me dispel a common myth that we have regarding reading. And that is that if we read faster than we normally do, we would understand and retain less than what we normally do. And this is absolutely false. For most of us, when we read, we get distracted. And why do we get distracted? Because reading is really boring. So if we can actually eliminate distractions, we would increase our focus. And if we could increase our focus, we would be able to read faster, isn't it? That makes logical sense. So this is what speed reading is all about. Eliminating distractions so you can be more focused and read faster. Happy reading, everyone.
Reading it up in the reading department. Sanjeev Jayaratnam, thank you very much for joining us in Life in 60. please email us on kaleidoscopeweekly1@gmail.com with any feedback, suggestions, and even stories you'd like to see on the program. We would love to hear from you. So until next week, stay positive, stay healthy, and stay happy. Now, here's your Kaleidoscope takeaway. The future depends on what you do today.